Munani, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There are those who always suggest that one should add Awe Masakanus just to cover the full spectrum. My naam is Hendrik Wijngaard en Theo Kemp van die Jakes Gerwel Stichting het vir my gevra om hierdie gesprek te lei. Wat ek nou hier doen is iets wat julle gerus agter my aan kan doen. Jy neem jou foon en dan sit jy dit daar op silent en maak seker dat hy heeltemal stil gaan wees. Ek hou hom net hier omdat ek moet tyd dophou. And because I'm shorter than most of my panel members, I have to position myself at the hier begin. Julle ekskuus, ek sal met Engels praat vanoggend, want hier is van ons paneellede wat nie so goed is met Afrikaans hier nou. Terwyl jy ook daar sit, hou my tog in jou gebede, want die taal van my tong is mos nou maar Afrikaans. But I do have those who command the English language quite well, such as Dr. Oscar van Heerden, my friend from school. We were activists, ons was activiste. Ja, maar ek bedoel, dis so lank terug, minister, ek sal nou nie daaroor praat nie. Okay. Hy was dalk, ja. Ons vertrekpunt vir hierdie gesprek is hierdie boek wat julle hier voorsien. Behind Prison Walls, Unlocking a Safer South Africa. En dis 'n baie belangrike subtitel van die boek. Want terwyl jy dink dit gaan net hier oor wat in tronke aangaan, dink ek is die bedoeling van die 3 auteurs dat hulle wil hê ons moet uiteindelik aan tronke dink as 'n manier om die samelewing 'n veiliger plek vir almal te maak. Daaroor sal hulle baie meer sê. Ek kan sê as ek dat ek net gou vir julle vertel wie hulle is in geval jy nie weet nie. To your far left, it's not a political reference, it's just maar hy het so 'n bietjie van 'n klap van daai weg seker as jy sy geskiedenis ken, is Justice Edwin Cameron. Julle ken hom as iemand wat op die konstitusionele hof se regbank gesit het, en dat hy ook en dit is eintlik waaroor die boek of die aanknopingspunt met die boek, dat hy ook die inspecting judge was van wat ons noem JICS, dis die Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. And then here to my immediate right, let me get the pronunciation right, Sohela Surajpal. She worked as a law clerk and a researcher for JICS while the judge was the inspecting judge. And next to the judge is Rebecca Gore. She used to do the same job. Did you finish your master's? Yes. Fantastic. And dan hier in die middel, Dr. Pieter Groenewald, Oom Pieter, as he is fondly called by those who appreciates the work that he does now as our new Minister of Correctional Services. Dankie ook dat u hier is vanoggend, minister. Ek het vir hulle gesê ek gaan begin met die maklike vraag. Die maklike vraag is iets wat eintlik 'n diepte daaraan het, en dit is wat hulle elkeen se eerste kennismaking met hierdie verskynsel wat ons tronke noem of korrektiewe dienste sentrums noem deesdae. And it is a point that is touched on, referred to by the Honorable Judge Cameron die reg aan die begin. I'm not going to open the book and try to find that reference. I've got my notes here. Your first encounter, Judge Cameron, described in chapter 1. So there are 2 parts. It's you visiting the prison, and then you also share some family history with us, namely your father's own incarceration for car theft. So miskien kan jy net vinnig daaroor iets sê, and then Rebecca, I'm going to ask you, the minister, and Sohela, to minister, remember that's lovely, to also share with us what was your first encounter with a prison or prisons.
Hendrik, mag ek net sê, dis 'n baie groot plesier vir my om hier te wees met my medeskrywers en met die minister. Hy het nie beaming van my nodig nie, maar hy is 'n ernstige man en hy neem sy werk ernstig op. Die enigste goeie ding dat ons die grootste kabinet in die hele wêreld het, is dat die korrektiewe dienste apart afgestig is van die departement konstitusionele ontwikkeling en justisie, en toe het ons 'n toegewyde minister gekry en hy is toegewyd. Dis al wat ek gaan sê oor u, Pieter. En my medeskrywers is ek verskriklik trots op. Hulle het die meeste van die boek geskryf. So, laat ek net Heinrich se, my pa was in Sonderwater vir kinderdiefstal en dit was op die stadium toe ek en my 2 susters na 'n kindertuis in Queenstown gestuur is, so dit was 'n traumatiese tyd vir ons en ek onthou vir sekere redes wat ek in die boek uiteensit, dat hy daar was en my eerste tronkbesoek, nie as regter nie, maar nadat ek aangestel is deur president Ramaphosa as hoof van JICS, die inspektoraat vir korrektiewe dienste, was aan Sonderwater. Toe vra ek die toerleier, waar sou die blanke, want toe was daar reeds van 1959 af baie strenge skeiding, waar was die blanke prisoniers, gevangenes gehuisves in Sonderwater, en hy wys toe vir my. Dis 'n reeks kasernes wat die Italiaanse oorlogs aangehoudenis opgerig het. En dan Heinrich verwys ook na 'n tweede beskrywing in die boek, toe ek op Stellenbosch was. Stellenbosch, is daar enigiemand van Stellenbosch? En ek het toe 'n vakansiewerk by 'n regter gekry wat op rondgaande diens was in vereniging en ons het toe die vereniging Tronk besoek en daar was ook 'n paar traumatiese ervarings daardie oggend. Die een wat ek nou gaan noem is dat ons het na die manstronk gegaan. Daar was 'n blanke afdeling en swart afdeling en toe gaan ons na die vroue afdeling waar daar net vrouens was. En my regter Douglas Davidson het die vrouens is aangetree in die vierkant binne in die vereniging Tronk en hy sê vir hulle, how many of you are here for Dagga? En al die vrouens het hulle hande opgesteek. Dit is 5 jaar na dat Dr. Connie Mulder die minimum vonnisse vir Dagga in 1971 deur die Suid-Afrikaanse parlement gepasseer het. Ek los dit daar en Heinrich, baie dankie vir die inleiding en dis 'n groot plesier om saam met julle almal te wees.
Hi, good morning. It's a delight to be here and to be on this panel with my co-authors and with the minister. So my first encounter with prisons firstly came from quite a research perspective. Before I clerked for Judge Cameron, I was doing a research project into understanding HIV behind bars and how HIV was operating and being treated in our prisons. And then when I started working for Judge Cameron at JICS, we speak about this in the book, we went to do an investigation where an inmate at Diepkloof, known as Sun City, he had actually committed suicide. And we were going to go see his cell in the awaiting trial section to understand what had happened and how it had happened. And it was during the pandemic, so I have quite a vivid recollection of being all of us wearing masks. It was a very overcrowded center. And what always struck me, and we speak about this in the book, is that the person who had committed suicide, this young boy who was awaiting trial, was around my age. And it felt that we had shared the sense of both being born free in a democratic South Africa, but how did his life end that way and my life's carrying on in this way. And so it's always disturbed me and concerned me, and why we want to share both the anecdotes and what we learned and what we witnessed going into prisons with our unique access working for JICS, but also the research and the history and going forward and how we can do better.
Goeiemôre aan almal en dankie vir die geleentheid. Ek wil sê, want die vraag is, wat was jou eerste kennismaking met 'n tronk? Nou, ek was besonder gelukkig geweest. Die eerste keer wat ek nou kennis gemaak het met 'n tronk is toe ek 'n minister geword. Nou, ek was 'n woelige knapie, sê my ouers vir my. Ek was nogal stouterig, sê hulle. Daai tyd het nou nie snaaks 'n bietjie klippe in die aand op iemand se dak gaan gooi en al die tipe van goed nie. En as jy gevang was, het jou pa jou sommer 'n pak slaag gegee. So jy daarom nie tronk toe gegaan soos in vandag se tyd amper nie. So dit is my kennismaking met ons tronke. En ek kan verder as ons met die gesprek aangaan, dan sal ons sekere aspekte daarvan bespreek. Maar laat ek sommer dadelik sê, dis nie lekker in die tronk nie. Jy wil nie daar wees nie.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you. while working at JICS, I visited a number of prisons with Justice Cameron, but before that I worked for a year at the Constitutional Court, clerking for Justice Madlanga, and the Constitutional Court is built on the site of colonial and apartheid era prisons. Those prisons don't function anymore, they've been converted into museums, but the court itself is in the awaiting trial block of one of those prisons, and the actual part of the actual courtroom is built from the same bricks that made up that prison, and you can still visit cells and see what they were like. And working there, it left a deep impression on me, because the court is this place of justice, of human rights, of our new democracy, and it's such a hopeful place to work in. And the symbolism of it being built on the site of so much past injustice it left a great impression on me, and it made me feel that we'd come so far as a country, leaving behind this dark history and building something better on top of it. But when I worked for JICS and visited our current system, our current prisons, I felt disillusioned, because of course we've made very important progress as a country, including in our prison system, but in many ways they still mirror and replicate the same injustices and dynamics of our apartheid era prisons. So that was my first real encounter with prisons, and it's shaped a lot and been reshaped by the work I've then done at JICS.
So because we have limited time, I won't be able to pose questions to all three authors all the time, but I'm going to allow you to decide amongst yourself who should respond to any particular question. Let's start with the first one. What is the purpose of a prison today?
So the purpose of a prison today, I think instinctively we think it's to pluck dangerous people from society, remove them from society, given some harms that they have caused. But prisons are also meant to be places of reform and rehabilitation. So I think on the one hand, we're doing the removing. We are taking large groups of people and putting them in our prisons in South Africa. But I don't think we're doing the second necessary step, which is ensuring reform and rehabilitation. Because something we cover in the book that is quite critical is we like to think when you put people in prison and you lock them up and throw away the key, they are removed. But our prison walls are very porous. People come in and out of the system all the time. And so we have to think what are their experiences in prison that they're going to bring back to their communities, back to society, back to all of us. So it's not enough to say, let's just remove people. We have to say, how can we reform? How can we assist people? So when they come back out, they have better opportunities, they have a better chance to lead a flourishing and lawful life on the outside. So we have a very high recidivism rate in South Africa, which means if you are incarcerated, your chance of being reincarcerated is about 60 to 90%. So what goes on there affects all of us here.
And so the book tells us that we have about 243 prisons, Minister, which constitutes and that we have 164,885 164,885 prisoners or inmates, of which 104,000 more or less has been sentenced, and 1/3, about 60,000, are awaiting trial. This figure is from early 2025 when the book was written, but I would imagine that it hasn't changed much, Minister. Die grootste tronkbevolking in Afrika. Hoe voel jy daaroor?
Kom ek sê net eers
Behalwe dat het vir jou 'n job gegee het.
Ja, ek wil begin om te sê by die eerste vraag. Hoe sien ek 'n tronk? Laat ek dit duidelik stel, hoe sien ek as minister 'n tronk? Ek sien dit as 'n instelling of 'n plek waar daar 'n balans gehandhaaf moet word tussen byvoorbeeld straf aan die een kant en rehabilitasie aan die ander kant. En ons moet 'n gebalanseerde perspektief daarop hê. Daar is soms 'n neiging om net te kyk na die gerehabiliteerde kant. Ek sê daar moet ook regverdigheid wees vir die slagoffers van misdaad. Want hulle het ook menseregte en hulle menseregte was geskenk. So ek sien dit as 'n instelling waar daar 'n balans gehandhaaf moet word. Ja, daar is straf, maar ja, as jy 10 jaar vonnis gekry het, na die 10 jaar gaan jy terug in die gemeenskap en het ons 'n verantwoordelikheid om te sorg dat daardie mense sekere programme gevolg het om gerehabiliteer te word en te verstaan dat jy kan, al het jy 'n fout gemaak, nog steeds weer 'n goeie burger van Suid-Afrika word. Dis die taak. Die statistiek op hierdie stadium, bietjie verouderd, ja. Tans, die nuutste statistiek, ons het so 106.083 gevonnisde persone in die tronke. Die 243 is korrek. En dan het ons so amper 63.500 verhoor afwagtendes. Nou kom ek gee hier net 'n bietjie perspektief, want dit word elke keer na verwys en dit gaan oor die oorbevolking. Tans is daar 107.083 beddens. Jy het net soveel ruimtes, spasie, en dit is waar die beddens inpas. Maar het nou die getalle gehoor. So daar's genoeg beddens vir die gevonnisdes. Maar dan kom jy met jou verhoor afwagtendes. En dis waar 'n probleem ontstaan. En dis waar die oorbevolking ontstaan, en tans trek ons hier so by 58, amper 59% oorbevolking. Ons sit daar met mense ek het 6 mense wat al meer as 10 jaar verhoor afwagtend is. 10 jaar. En dit is eintlik, reflekteer dit op ons strafregstelsel as sodanig. Nou kom ons by rehabilitasie. En ek dink regter Cameron sal vir u ook daaroor kan vertel. Jy kan nie werklike behoorlike rehabilitasie doen in so oorbevolkte sel. Jy kan nie. Want jou probleem is, daar kom die mense in aanraking, en laat ons dadelik sê, dit is 'n onderskeid. Jou verhoor afwagtendes word nie byvoorbeeld gemeng met byvoorbeeld gevonnisdes. Hulle is apart. Maar dink vir jouself, jy het 'n hemp gesteel. En nou kry jy byvoorbeeld, ja, jy kan borg kry van R500, maar jy kan dit nie bekostig nie. Dan gaan jy soontoe. Nou sit jy in 'n oorbevolkte sel. En dis waar ek komplimente het vir regter Cameron hulle, waar hulle begin het met, soos hulle het sê, 'n borgfonds. Ons sit met ongeveer 3.300 verhoor afwagtendes, wat nie 'n borg van minder as R1.000 kon betaal het nie. En ek weet jy is haastig, Andrieg, maar gee my net dit om te sê, dat die punt is net eenvoudig, dat so 'n persoon word dan 'n geharde misdadiger, en dit kos die belastingbetaler R463 per dag vir daardie persoon. Die sommetjies maak net nie sin.
So thanks, Minister, for being sensitive to our time limitation. It is not because I don't want you to speak. So Helle, and then there's a sense that despite this situation that the minister is dealing with, the budget that he receives annually still prioritizes incarceration as opposed to rehabilitation.
Well, of course, there are serious security needs that the prison system has, and we understand that staff need to be paid. But we, at JIX and in the book, spoke a lot about the serious shortages of, for example, professional staff that were responsible for rehabilitation. So that means psychologists, social workers, teachers, people who can administer skills training programs, and then is also the equipment needed for those programs. Now, of course, the Minister and Treasury will decide how that budget is split, but the clear point is that in our country in general, we don't have enough resources. I think the average South African would struggle to access a psychologist, but that shortage is pronounced in our prisons, and what that means is that the rehabilitation we've all been speaking about can't happen effectively. But what we do in the book when we recommend reforms is we talk about reforms that need to happen in prisons and in the criminal justice system, but we also speak about reforms that need to happen outside of them, in our communities, in the education system, in the healthcare system, so that people aren't pushed into the conditions that make them turn to crime. So if we're speaking about budget, I think we also need to speak about how we are prioritizing these other aspects of people's lives so that they aren't vulnerable and they aren't pushed to eventually turn to crime.
So Sohela and fellow panelists, it's very flattering when you look at me most of the time, but I would prefer that you look at the audience so that I can also have a peek here at my notes, you know. Judge, let's stick to the budget issue just for a second. There's been a cut over the past 5 years of more than 11 billion rand, Minister. So that, looking at the 25-26 allocation of 29.2 billion rand, that means that's about 10 million down from where it used to be. And there's a slight increase for the following two budget terms. How important is more money for the situation that we're dealing with?
Heinrich, ek gaan teruggaan soos enige vernuftige paneellid, gaan ek
Ja.
teruggaan na jou vorige vraag.
Ja.
Jy vra waarvoor is die tronk en ek gaan terugkom by die begroting. Die paradoks wat ons in Suid-Afrika het, is dat ons het die beste wetgewing in die wêreld. Ons het die beste grondwet. Ons het die beste handves van menseregte. Maar ons toepassing skiet tekort. So ons wet, die 98 wet, Correctional Services Act, bepleit opvoeding, hy bepleit herintegrering, bepleit rehabilitering, maar ons skiet tekort. Maar die punt wat ek wil maak is 'n groter punt, en dit kom terug by jou begroting. Meer geld vir die tronkbesetting gaan nie ons misdaadprobleem oplos nie. Ons het 'n gruwelike fout begaan in 1998, onder die Mandela presidentskap, onder die Mandela parlement. Ek weet nie of u daar was nie, minister, in 98, u was reeds daar. En ons het ons vertroue geplaas in gevangesetting. Dit was 'n dwaalspoor, dit was 'n verkeerde skuif. Ons noem dit in die boek, what do we call it? Wrong turn.
Yes.
Wrong turn. En gruwelike misdaad, want ons het wat daaraan gelei het, toe ons gedink het, langer vonnisse, verpligte vonnisse, moeiliker borgtog, moeiliker parooltoelating. Ons het gedink, dit gaan die misdaadprobleem oplos, en dit het nie. Ons sit meer en meer mense in kleiner en kleiner tronke, die aanpassings wat die minister so pas gegee het, wys dat die tronkbevolking eintlik opgegaan het, marginaal, sedert 2 jaar terug toe ons die boek geskryf het. En die antwoord dis 'n moeilike antwoord, maar dis 'n belangrike antwoord, want dit is ook die oplossing vir ons hele land se probleme. Ons moet begin. Ons sê in die boek misdaadsintelligensie. Wat doen Jacob Zuma? Hy stel 'n misdadiger aan, Mr. Richard Mdluli. Hy stel onbevoegde mense aan as polisiehoofde. Ek sê nog, en dit is 'n gevaarlike ding om te sê, maar ek trotseer dit nie te min, die misdaadsintelligensie wat die sleutel is tot die hele misdaadbekamping, is nog steeds in die hande van misdadigers. En dit kom uit in die parlement en in die Madlanga kommissie. So ons het en dit is die oplossing vir al ons probleme. Daar's nie 'n enkele probleem in hierdie land, pragtige land van 68 miljoen mense nie, met die beste sonskyn, die beste weer en die beste mense in die wêreld. Ons moet begin met reconstructering. There's no problem in this country that is irremediable. Nou, om terug te kom by die vraag, soos 'n goeie paneellid, kom ek terug by jou vraag. Nog tronke, nog begroting gaan nie daarmee help nie.
We'll get to some of the solutions that you suggest in the book, Rebecca. When one reads the book, one is struck by the fact that it seems to me that the co-authors of this book leans more toward creating a human rights heaven for those incarcerated. And you know, it's an issue that South Africans are struggling to deal with, because there's almost an expectation that when there's wrongdoing on the part of the accused or the prisoner, then that person should be treated as such.
So in the book, we grapple with, and based on our work, this idea of what do human rights-based prisons look like? And I don't think it's just the three of us that think there should be a human rights focus. I think it's in our constitution. Section 35(2)(e) states that if you are going to incarcerate people and keep them in detention, the conditions must be consistent with human dignity. So this is the very basis of our social contract as a society. And what we do in the book is we try to say, what does that look like? What could that be? And we have various debates amongst each other of what that could look like. But a common thread I want to underscore is that we don't think people shouldn't be held accountable for wrongdoing. We think people can be agents, active agents with choices, and if they make bad choices, given limited opportunities in a very unequal society, to an extent they should be held accountable. But we don't think accountability has to equal punishment. We don't think because you were caught smoking dagga, you should therefore be in an overcrowded cell for 4 years awaiting your trial, exposed to the health conditions, sexual violence, other horrific consequences, inability to perhaps you're a breadwinner for your family. We don't think that is the type of punishment that is just and fair. So we don't say, let's be naive about the problem. I think we try to deal with the problem pretty head on. We say in the book, there's no silver bullet, there's no simple solution, but what Justice Cameron was saying about this wrong turn that we took, this turn to be tough on crime, we did it in the late 90s. It is now 2026. It's not working. It's not working for us as a society who are scared of crime. It is not working for people incarcerated. It's not working for the minister's department and this big responsibility he has. And so what we say in the book is we need to think of different solutions, not necessarily to be tough on crime, but to be smart when it comes to crime. What are the true causes of crime? Sahela mentioned the importance of education, healthcare, other opportunities. Justice Cameron spoke about crime intelligence. So we think it's not enough to say punishment equals horrific conditions in Pollsmoor down the road from here. We say what is actually going to stop crime in a meaningful long-term way.
And
I'm going to jump in very quickly. Because I think the minister started by saying that our prisons are bad places. You don't want to go to prison. And I think it's hard to understand exactly what that means when most of us have only encountered a prison on TV. An American-style prison, you maybe have one cellmate. That's what it looks like. Our prisons don't look like that. When we go to big prisons like Pollsmoor, like Durban, Pretoria, Joburg, a cell might be the size of maybe this room excluding the stage. And it might have 70, 80 fully grown men living and sleeping in those rooms. In overcrowded prisons, they might get only 1 hour outside their cells in a day, if that, because of staff shortages, because of space restraints. And so they'll spend 23 hours a day confined in this tiny space with small windows, with little air getting through, with broken lights, which means they spend much of their time in the dark. They probably don't have a radio or TV. They have very few books or anything else to spend their time doing. They might share 1 or 2 toilets and 1 or 2 showers amongst those 80 men with limited ability to keep it clean, especially when there's no water, which is often a problem in South Africa. And so when we talk about a human rights heaven, what we are talking about is an alternative to this inhumane condition that we are incarcerating 160,000 of our fellow citizens in. So we're not saying 5-star hotels, but we're saying this can't be something that happens in our name as citizens.
Let me just quote from the book, Minister. I'll be with you now. In fairness to the authors, they're also stating that prisons need to be humanized does not mean there are no humans in need of imprisonment. I'm just using that quote want die regter het nou nog gepraat van 'n vernuftige paneellid, so laat ek nou probeer wys ek is 'n vernuftige onderhoudvoerder. Dat ek die boek gelees het en 'n paar aanhalings gebruik. Minister Sohela just touched on something, the H word, because there is a sense that yes, while we should be treating inmates in a more humane way, particularly to move away from the pre-1994 prisons dispensation that we had, and there are chapters in the book that deals with that history. We have now arrived at a point where South Africans feel that prisons became hotels, and what they present as proof is what you find when you do your raids: cell phones, drugs, kettles, and here's the concerning part: prove that these inmates are being aided or assisted by some officials, by social workers, and also family members and associates. Your response, although I said you're not here to defend the department, maar wys waar jy in staat is.
Dankie Heinrich. Nee, ek hoef nie te verdedig nie. Ek glo in die realiteite, die werklikheid, die waarheid. Die waarheid is die volgende: jy het verwys na die begroting, dis korrek. Oor die laaste omtrent 5-6 jaar wat die begroting gesny was met 11,7 miljard rand. Intussen, as ons gaan na die strafregstelsel toe wat die regter na verwys het, my standpunt is die grootste probleem in Suid-Afrika oor misdaad is straffeloosheid. En as ek praat van straffeloosheid, ek meen as jy gaan kyk na die moordsyfer in Suid-Afrika, wat van die hoogstes in die wêreld is, net om vir 'n perspektief te gee. Die wêreldgemiddeld is 7 per 100.000 van die bevolking. Ons in 'n trek nou al by 37 per 100.000 van die bevolking. Intussen het daar nie regtig meer tronke bygekom nie, maar straffeloosheid is dat jy kry mense hulle pleeg 'n moord en hulle kom weg daarmee. En wat nou besig is om te gebeur, is dat daar word strenger opgetree deur die polisie, want die strafregstelsel is polisie, howe, korrektiewe dienste. So ons is op die ontvangkant. So daar is nou 'n verbetering in, kan ek amper sê, vervolging. So ons gaan meer mense kry, maar ons kry nie meer tronke nie. Ons kan daarom sê die minister van Finansies het aangekondig met sy begrotingsrede, ons kry daarom 2 nuwe tronke wat gebou gaan word met 3000 beddens elk, maar dit gaan 'n paar jaar vat. Kom ek kom by die aanhalings wat jy gemaak het, Heinrich, en dan is 'n uur te kort. In die eerste plek, ja, ek onthou net toe ek minister geword het, was daar op TikTok hierdie persoon wat vertel het hoe wonderlik dit is in die tronk, dis 3 etes per dag, en dit gaan net jolig, en hulle het selfone ensovoorts. Maar gaan kyk maar weer, so 'n week na daardie video, toe het hy 'n tweede video gemaak, en toe het hy skielik agtergekom en gesê, dis nou nie meer so lekker in die tronk nie. So dit is ook die werklikheid. As ons gaan kyk in terme van die probleem, en ek sê dit reguit, die tronke op hierdie stadium dra ook by tot verdere misdaad. Hoor mooi wat ek sê. Dit dra by tot verdere misdaad. Hoekom? Want daar is nie behoorlike, kan ek sê, dissipline in terme selfs wat die amptenare betref nie. Ek het fantastiese amptenare in die departement. Hardwerkend, eerlik, integriteit. Ver die meerderheid. Maar dan sit jy met jou probleem van smokkelware wat gebeur. Jy het verwys na selfone. Die bendeleiers wat vanuit die tronk uit nog steeds met hulle aktiwiteite voortgaan. Nou, dan is daar baie mense wat vir my sê, maar kry seinblokkeerders. Nou kom ons vat Goodwood net die ander kant. Die ou tegnologie kan jy nie 'n seinblokkeerder daarin sit nie, want dan raak dit die N1. Want dan blok die seine daar, en as daar 'n ongeluk onder daai brug is, daai wisselaar wat daar is, wat al baie keer gebeur het, dan kan hulle nie kommunikeer met mekaar nie. So, dis moeilik. Jy kry moderne tegnologie, wat jy kan letterlik net die selle afblok, maar dit kos geld. Ons het net gepraat van gevangenissetting, wat die grootste gedeelte van die begroting kry. Kom ek sê vir 69%, kom ons maak het 70% van die totale begroting van korrektiewe dienste, gaan vir personeelsalarisse. So ek kry op die einde van die dag eintlik net 30% van die begroting vir operasionele doeleindes. En dit kos geld. En dit is waarmee ons besig is, maar laat ek ook sommer dadelik sê. Ek is besig met 'n plan. Dit gaan nie baie lank wees nie, dan gaan hulle agterkom selfone gaan nie meer werk nie. En natuurlik, jy het korrupsie onder jou lede. Maar ons is besig, ek is in die proses om die wet te herskryf. En ek wil in daardie wet sien dat indien 'n persoon skuldig bevind word, 'n amptenaar byvoorbeeld, wat deel was en medepligtig was aan enige smokkelary of iets, word die persoon se muur afgedank. Nie net 'n waarskuwing nie, se muur afgedank.
So Rebecca, you heard the minister referring to straffeloosheid. Translated to English, it should mean lawlessness. He regards as what's it? Ja, maar ek wil nou jy sê die definition so wees no consequence for wrongdoing. And yet in the book, the three of you emphasizes the over-reliance on mass incarceration as an expected solution to the straffeloosheid, and it doesn't quite seem to be working.
Die Oxford woord is impunity.
Dankie oom Pieter. Your English is delicious. Okay. Rebecca, I don't know if you just want to say something
Yes.
about that.
Yes.
Is there a contradiction?
So I think this, if I can call it a culture of impunity, is quite embedded in our culture at the moment. I think we often are reading horrific newspaper articles and seeing many commissions of inquiry pop up time and time again where people have committed some serious wrongdoing and they're getting away with it. Why, if you are a government official and you've been accused of wrongdoing, you get a commission of inquiry, but someone who's accused of a very petty offense, perhaps, they are awaiting trial for 4 years. Sitting in our the horrific conditions in our waiting trial centers. So I think this impunity, the sense of lawlessness, is a major problem in South Africa, and I think it impacts many different pockets of our society. But I think, when we cover this in our book, it didn't happen overnight. It goes back to what Justice Cameron was saying, how through President Zuma's era, how they intentionally destroyed our crime intelligence, and time and again we are seeing so many horrific articles about the state of our policing in South Africa. So I think this impunity that is happening isn't just in prisons, isn't just in the Department of Correctional Services. I think it's in many other departments. And I think that's why we have to zoom out and say, how do we deal with this? How do we say if you have done something wrong, you are held accountable? You don't get a cushy commission of inquiry, if I can call it that, and all of us get a 1,000-page report to read. There needs to be consequences. We should think of the criminal justice system as a machine with different parts, and all of the parts of the machine need to work in order for us to move ahead. So I understand that the department in many respects is inheriting certain problems. Minister, I understand you don't decide who is incarcerated, their length of sentence. That is something for our National Prosecuting Authority, for the judges to decide. And so to some extent it's inherited, but we have to think, how do we get the whole machine to work? How do we improve our National Prosecuting Authority, improve our policing, ensure that judges know what is happening inside our prisons, which is why we're grateful to be working with Justice Cameron and currently the new inspecting judge, Judge Bozalak, who have taken their role so seriously. So all of us as citizens need to say, we want the whole machine to work, not just one pocket.
And I'll add again, we make a point in the book about, it's about this our subtitle, Making South Africa Safer. What prevents crime is not the severity of the sentence or the harshness of the punishment, but the certainty of consequences. So if someone is murdering someone and it doesn't really matter to them if the sentence is 10 years or life without parole, if they know they're never going to be caught. And the situation in our country now is that that person is probably right. They are never going to be caught. We ran some very rough numbers comparing the number of murders, SAPS reports in a year, and murder statistics are usually quite reliable, versus the number of murder convictions that the NPA reports in a year. And we figured out that only about 11% of total murders result in conviction and sentencing, which means you have about an 89% chance of getting away with murder. And so our point is, rather than trying to make punishment harsher and harsher and harsher, let's focus on certainty of accountability or punishment. And that's why we stress the importance of crime intelligence, policing, prosecuting, functioning courts.
Heinrich, gaan ek gou inkom met 'n syfer. This is an important figure. The two figures from our book that are stats are important is the one that Sehela has just mentioned, which is a very rough methodological abstraction that you've got about a 90% chance of getting away with murder. The second one is that end of 1994, how many people in South Africa are serving sentences of life imprisonment? 495. 2026, 20,000. And the point is an important one because we are what is 20 over 160? 1/8. 1/8 is 16%, is it not? 16% of our prison bevolking consists of people serving life imprisonment. I want to say this controversially and difficultly, mostly, not entirely pointlessly. We acknowledge in the book that there are dangerous people who should be kept locked up for a long time. Die beste motief, beweegrede vir my, vir lang vonnisse, ook selfs vir die doodsvonnis, is wraaksug, revenge. I understand revenge. I'm respectful. If we went to Mitchell's Plain or to Langa, I would be respectful of the audience that says my child was killed in a drive-by shooting. So I understand and I respect. I'm humble before the need for revenge, for vengeance. But we can't be unsmart about it. So let me say this, and it's controversial, that the default sentence for most rapes is either 15 or 20 years or life imprisonment. We have got thousands of rapists serving life imprisonment, where in most comparable societies, autocratic or democratic, the sentence for rape is between 5 and 12 years. That's a controversial thing to say. The rape activists are correct that some rapists do need to be sent to jail for a long time. But our sentencing is grotesquely misshapen because most rapists aren't even scared of consequences. If we had the certainty, this goes back to Sehela's criminological and penological point, if we had the certainty that every single rapist would serve 2 years, rapes would come down. But you need that certainty, and it goes back to what the minister was saying. We need to start with crime intelligence, then with the police, competent people of integrity at the head of those two, and the same with the National Prosecuting Authority and the prosecutors.
Judge, a short response to this. Are we not over or trying to overcompensate post-1994 for how ugly, how inhumane the pre-1994 system was for whoever was incarcerated?
Short answer, Heinrich, ons maak het erger. We have made it worse.
A quote from the book, "Democracy brought more peace and safety, but citizens became preoccupied with fear of crime." Rebecca?
Yes, so in the book we look at this this notion of this post-apartheid crime wave. So let me take it back a step. You have, as Heinrich said, we had in the early 90s our beautiful constitution, we had our Mandela era Correctional Services Act, all this other law reform, and in all directions we should have been creating and protecting quite a safe society. But what happened in the late 90s is what they call a post-apartheid crime wave. There was this idea that crime was increasing in the late 90s. But based on the studies that we've looked at and the research we've done, is this notion of a post-apartheid crime wave isn't actually founded in any evidence. It's almost it's almost a myth of some sort. So what you did actually have is an increase in the fear of crime. So we looked at conviction rates, we looked at other data. You don't see an increase. But if you look at how people were reporting fear, people in the new South Africa were very scared of crime. And so what that did is that fueled a whole batch of very punitive laws. So we've talked a lot about sentencing. So what happened is, in the late 90s, we decided to give minimum mandatory sentences a go, which means that if you are accused of a certain crime, there's a high sentence you'll get unless you can show other substantial compelling circumstances. That was meant to be an interim measure to just help us while we were in the so-called post-apartheid crime wave. But it's become permanent. So what happened is we were responding to fear of crime. We don't believe we responded in a way that both assisted that fear. If anything, it prompted more crime, more violence in our society. And I think what it does, by focusing so much on being hard on crime and trying to be as punitive as possible, is we forget about other measures. Something we talk about in the book and we debate amongst ourselves is, what about all these other social ills? What about the low, we spoke about budgets, what about how minor the budget is for victims of gender-based violence? Where are women and children and men and others meant to go when they are victims and survivors of this violence? That's a very small budget if we contrast with the prison budget. What about sports betting? This is something that has proliferated across our society. It is causing serious harm, especially to low-income communities. I don't see any laws coming about to crack down on that as far as I'm aware. So the point I'm making, and I'm trying to be provocative here, is to say, I think this idea of harsher sentences, harsher punishment, incarcerating more and more people isn't making us safer. We have to think of other measures.
So some of the other measures, Minister, wat in die boek voorgestel word, is in die eerste plek improve policing, waarmee jy nou nie direct te doen het nie. Hulle sê, as ons geslagsgebaseerde geweld inperk of verminder, sal dit 'n verskil maak. En dan reduce overcrowding, deur byvoorbeeld hierdie die onbekostigbaarheid van borgtog vir mense wat wat se woord vir petty crimes gepleeg het. Ja, jy het ook 'n voorstel gehad daaroor. Jy het lyfstraf uitgehaal. Dit was jou beste voorstel. Kom ons praat daaroor.
Kom ons praat. Kom ek sê gou vir jou so, as dit gaan oor bevolking. Ek's 'n paar goed wat ek sou wou gesê het, maar kom ons sê dit. Nommer 1 is, ek sit met ongeveer so 26.500, amper 27.000 buitelanders. Ek wil van hulle ontslae raak, ek wil hê hulle moet teruggaan na hulle lande toe. Maar dit vereis wysiging aan die wet, want die wet sê hulle moet hier wees. So ons vorder goed daarmee, so ek hoop volgende jaar is ons op 'n punt wat ons kan sê, ons gaan terug, ons stuur julle terug. Dan is daar so 3.300 verhoor afwagtendes van 'n borgtog van minder R1.000 en minder. So as ons daardie situasie kan hanteer, dan bring ons dit aansienlik af. Maar dit gaan ook, as ons praat byvoorbeeld van, en ek wil net dit sê, en jy moet mooi luister wat regter Cameron gesê het. Baie belangrik. Hy het gesê, die omstandighede in ons tronke tans is erger as wat dit was voor 94. Ons moet dit onthou. Ons is geneig om altyd net, as dit gaan oor 94, voor 94, alles is apartheidse verskil. Ons moet wegbeweeg daarvan. Ons moet nou begin om te sê, wat is ons probleem nou? En nie probeer om blame te verplaas na die verlede nie. Ons moet, kan ons sê, beheer vat van ons huidige situasies. Ja, daar was verkeerde keer dinge gedoen, maar leer uit die verlede uit. En sorg dat ons dit nie herhaal nie. Maar
Die regter het dit nie as 'n kompliment bedoel nie, hy het dit as 'n bekommernis bedoel en jy haal dit aan
hy het dit
asof
as 'n werklikheid en 'n waarheid gedoen. Dit is wat hy dit gedoen het. Want baie mense sê, maar dis nie waar nie. Ek hoor wat die regter sê, want hy was 'n regter, hy weet wat hy sê.
Maar pla dit die minister?
Nee, die wat? Wat plan?
Dat die omstandighede is wat dit nou is.
Natuurlik. Dit is nie aangenaam in die tronk, ek het dit mos nou gesê. Maar nou wil ek ook sê, parool is ook 'n manier om hierdie oorbevolking reg te stel. Nou, ek is ook in die proses, dat jy kry nou goeie gesofistikeerde elektroniese bande, wat die mense kan dra, wat jou monitor. Hy sê vir jou, waar is jy? En hy sê vir jou of jy alkohol gebruik, en of jy dwelms gebruik. Nou dis 'n standaard voorwaarde as jy op parool uitgaan mag jy nie byvoorbeeld alkohol gebruik nie. So as jy weet ek is nou op parool maar hulle gaan my kan monitor, dan gaan ek 2 keer dink as ek weer iets gaan fout doen. Ek gaan 2 keer dink as ek 'n moord gaan pleeg, want dan gaan hulle vir my presies op die plek kan sit. Maar dit kos geld, daardie bande. Laat ek dit sê oor, en ek weet regter Cameron en ek respekteer sy standpunt, hy het 'n argument oor om te sê lewenslange vonnis. Ons moet onthou, tans is die wet verander in die opsig, dat as jy 'n lewenslange vonnis kry, na Oktober 2004, dan beteken dit letterlik lewenslank. Nie soos voor 94 wat dit net 25 jaar is nie. 25 jaar, soos die wet tans lees, as jy lewenslang kry, kan jy na 25 jaar in aanmerking kom vir parool. Ek dink weer is 'n goeie ding, want die vooruitsig is, ek kan na 25 jaar uitgaan, ek gaan gemoniteer word of gecontroleer word, en as ek weer verkeerd doen, dan gaan ek terug. Dit is 'n afskrikmiddel in 'n sekere opsig. So 'n parool is deel daarvan. Maar laat ek dit ook sê, want ons tyd is klaar.
Dankie.
Ons moenie dink dat korrektiewe dienste is daar om die sosiaal-maatskaplike probleme van Suid-Afrika op te los nie. Die gemeenskap, die ouerskap moet die rol speel. Ons moet sorg dat ons kinders reg groot maak. Dis waar daar 'n groot fokus geplaas moet word. As ons praat van die bendegeweld hierso in die Weskaap, dit gaan hier oor 'n sosiaal-maatskaplike probleem. Nou kom mense, hulle beland in die tronk, nou wys hulle die vinger na korrektiewe dienste en sê, hoekom het julle nie behoorlike rehabilitasie gedoen nie? Hulle moes in die eerste plek daar gewees het nie. Dankie.
So die boek sê ook dat een van die oplossings is to reduce the number of long-serving inmates, en daar's 'n argument dat as mense ouer is, dan is hulle minder geneig om repeat offenders te raak. Jammer dat ek die taal so meng. Minister moet asseblief nie reageer nie. Ek wil vir Suela 'n
Nee, ek
kans
moet op
gee.
daai een reageer, ongelukkig. Ek dan die laaste keer. Ek is baie streng as dit gaan oor parool, oor mense wat lewenslang gevonnis is. En ek kyk net baie sterk ook na een aspek. Een is, wat is die risiko van heroortreding? Jy kan 'n man kry van 75, want dan kan hy nog steeds 'n vuurwapen gaan vat en weer 'n moord pleeg. So ek kyk na daai risiko, en as die risiko middelmatig of hoog is, dan gee ek nie parool nie.
Do you want to respond to that? Or should I give it to the judge? Asseblief Edwin.
Minister Suhela did an analysis of your first batch of parole refusals, which disturbed us. Now, I conveyed that to you in New York when we had an informal chat when we were both addressing the UN General Assembly on penology. But Suhela, just repeat those figures, because we were troubled by them. The minister approved this, die lewenslange gevonnistes moet deur die NCCS gaan. Dit is 'n komitee, 'n statutêre komitee wat die voorsitter se regter en die ondervoorsitter se regter, dit het 'n panoplie van deskundiges, kriminoloë, staatsaanklaers, polisiemanne, and they make the recommendation, but the minister has to sign off on it. And the minister's first batch after he took office were very disturbing to us.
I think it was a 6% approval of profiles that had already been approved by the NCCS. But the real problem here...
Ons wil jou net 'n klap gee. Jy mag nie antwoord nie.
And we had, of course, we had concerns about that, but the real problem, and we know the minister's argument is, he can't in good conscience approve parole, release on parole for people he thinks are still at risk. For us, the problem is, why are they still at risk after spending 25 years in prison, during which they are meant to be undergoing rigorous rehabilitation programs? And this goes back to something that's been a consistent theme. There aren't enough social workers. There aren't enough psychologists. Some of the programs they go through are rehabilitation in name only. We see the difference in prisons where there are functional, effective rehabilitation programs. We visited Durban Correctional Center a number of times while I was at JIX. And the last time we visited the sentenced prison, the head of center showed us a workshop that they had created where inmates were being taught how to make furniture, how to do upholstery, how to sew, how to do art and beadwork. And he told us since they started that program, violence levels at the prison had gone down noticeably. Because you go from having men who are spending 23 hours a day in these horrific conditions to men who maybe for the first time in their lives have a way to feel productive, have a way to feel affirmed, like they are doing something worthwhile with themselves and their capabilities. That's something we all want to feel in our lives. So the problem with parole, with everything else really in our prisons that we're not, and with our societies in general, all comes back down to that. I think we can both all agree on that, Minister.
Ek het goeie nuus. Ek het toe ek minister geword het gesê dat ek gaan fokus op selfvoorsienigheid. Met ander woorde, ons sit met plase. Hulle begin nou weer kos produseer. Kom ek van die bakkerye. Ek hoop om teen 28 nog 7 bakkerye gevestig te kry. Dan sal ons 100% onafhanklik wees wat brood betref. Toe ek minister geword het, toe betaal ons R24.50 vir 'n brood. Dis die beste brood wat jy kan koop in die supermark. Ja, ons vervaardig hom, jy's korrek. Ons vervaardig hom vir R8. So ek bespaar die belastingbetaler miljoene rande. Ons doen dit. Ons gee hulle 'n sertifikaat dat as hulle uitgaan, dan kan hulle hulle eie bakkery begin. Ek is besig met private ondernemings om byvoorbeeld ons landbou vir hulle ook 'n sertifikaat te gee. En dan is daar nou 'n maatskappy wat selfs dan kyk of hulle vir hulle kan werk kry. Maar kom ek sê die volgende, ek het dit gesê die portefeulje komitee. Want mense sê, maar ons doen te min om vir die mense ook werk te kry. Wat sê die Suid-Afrikaanse publiek? As jy 'n werk wil hê in vandag se tyd, want werk is skaars, werkloosheid is hoog, gaan pleeg 'n misdaad, gaan tronk toe, jy gaan 3 maaltye 'n dag kry, hulle gaan jou oplei, hulle gaan vir jou werk soek as jy daar uitkom. So as jy wil werk kry, doen dit. En dit kan nie gebeur nie. Ons moet as gemeenskap, ons moet weer vir ons mense sê, gee aandag aan jou kinders en voed hulle korrek op, dat hulle nie misdaad pleeg nie.
Judge Cameron, our time has expired, but I'm deliberately not making eye contact with Theo Kemp so that we can also allow the audience to pose a few questions. I am, though, interested in your response to something that connects or links to a reference that you made right at the beginning, and that's also in the beginning of the book, namely the experience with female inmates who were in prison because of dagga. En dis 'n ding wat ek vir jare ook al nie kan verstaan nie, dat mense toegesluit word. One of the solutions that you suggest as authors is to decriminalize some conducts that should not be crimes at all, you say. So here's an opportunity to be really controversial.
And it's explosive, Heinrich. Just 10, 12, 15 kilometers from here, there's carnage. The figures that the minister cites, 37 per 100,000, is mainly generated and boosted by what is happening in the Cape Flats and the further townships of Cape Town. There's a geographical separation inherited from apartheid, but not perpetuated along apartheid lines. It's much more complex along class lines. And there's a class point to be made here as well. The elite, us, we the elite, post-democracy, thought that we would be able to deal with our responsibility or misdaad te become by creating longer sentences. We failed. It was a misuse. Now, let me say what Heinrich is provoking me to say. Ons bepleit decriminalisering van dwelms. And we do so on the responsible grounds that it's been tried in various states in America, Oregon, Washington State, Portugal, Zurich, and it has had mixed results. It's not a panacea, but I can guarantee, ek sal my verstout om 'n waarborg uit te spreek, dat die misdaadsyfer en die dodesyfer, in hierdie townships, hier naby ons, sal daal as ons dwelms decriminaliseer. Why? Because the criminalization of drugs, like the criminalization of alcohol in America between 1920 and 1932, gives rise to gangsterism, to violence, to murders, to mafias, and it's exactly the same as alcohol. It was a catastrophe in America. It gave rise to the mafia. The criminalization of drugs is a catastrophe in South Africa. We do make that argument in the book. Heinrich, jy het my daartoe geprovokeer en ek hoop ek het jou tevrede
Baie,
gestel.
baie
Ek
dankie,
wil een
regter. Die
laaste
boek-
ding sê asseblief. Dis 'n goeie nuusboek. Ons bepleit oplossings, and we tell good news stories in the Minister's Department. We go out of our way to tell the good news story, the heartwarming encounters that we had in prisons, and the prisons like the one that Sehela mentioned in Durban, which are working.
Do you want to make a quick reference to Gavin? Gavin's story? Gavin, jy het ons nou vertel van die suksesstories en
Van Glenn Meyer. Glenn Meyer. Is
Yes,
it Glenn Meyer?
Is it Glenn? Yes.
You will tell, please.
So in the first chapter of the book, and actually something Sehela and I had asked Judge Cameron about, we writing this book about prisons and what was your experience as a judge sentencing people. And Judge Cameron has this really remarkable story where when he was presiding over a criminal trial, the accused and later found guilty person was Mr. Glenn Meyer, who had committed a violent crime, drug-induced, if I recall, very terrible crime. And when judge sentenced him, he gave him an opportunity to try to change his life. So if I understand correctly, he was still incarcerated, but with quite a reasonable sentence. And he was 19 at the time. And after writing this book and publishing this book, we've had the opportunity to meet Glenn. And he wrote to us, exactly. And he's an incredible person who, at one of our book events, got up and said when judge sentenced him, he felt that it was a challenge to change his life. And as a challenge he took wholeheartedly. And he has transformed his life. He has done amazing work, both for his family, but also for trying to help other incarcerated people learn skills and have opportunities. So it's such an important anecdote that if you sentence correctly, if you give someone an opportunity for change and give them an environment in which to do so, they can flourish. And we are so in awe of Glenn and what he's done in the relationship that Judge Cameron and Glenn have maintained to this day.
And I would just add, Glenn has been released and has built this productive, wholesome life. But Glenn made the point at our book launch that if he was sentenced under the sentencing guidelines that apply now, these mandatory minimum sentences, he would still be in prison today, and he would not have had the chance to rebuild his life and make amends to the people he harmed. And so that's the message.
Heinrich,
I'm so sorry. Vier vrae of kommentare of maar baie kort asseblief. Pieter, moet jy dit nou sê
Ek
of
moet
kan
dit sê. Ek moet dit sê. Ja,
Okay,
ek moet.
ek het gedog ek.
Daar's
ja.
baie suksesstories. Kom ons ek verwys na Stefaans Coetzee. Dis die bomplanter van Woester. Hy het 40 jaar tronkstraf gekry. Hy's uit op Parool. Hy skryf Afrikaanse boeke. Hy het verskeie toekennings al gekry, was nou die dag op Kwela gewees. Daar is suksesverhale.
Baie dankie. So laat ek net vir Theo in die hande kry. Ja, en dan gaan ons nog kan ons sommer net die hande sien van die drie ander mense. Daar 1 2 en dan lyk dit my ons kan wegkom met ja.
Goeiemôre almal en goeiemôre minister. Ek het
Verskoon my dat ek dit doen. Ek gaan moet vra dat jy spesifiek is, vra vir iemand en 'n naam noem en nie 'n toespraak maak.
Hier is 'n vraag vir die minister. My naam is Paulwin. Ek is van Mitchells Plain, Cape Flats. En minister het 'n punt gemaak in die begin en seker het 2 keer gesê dat die tronk is nie 'n aangename plek nie. Maar ek stem nie daarmee saam nie, want ek ken so baie ouens wat buite is. Hulle kan nie wag weer om terug te gaan nie. Want ek het nou gesien die statistiek wys hulle eet nie meer 4 eiers nie, hulle eet nou 2 eiers per week en ons het nou onlangs ook gesien wat kom uit die tronk uit. Wi-Fi routers en selfoon en alles dit. So dit is die eerste ding. Die tweede ding is u het gesê dis 'n sosiale probleem wat die ouers vir die kinders moet leer en so voorts. So dit is 'n sosiale siekteprobleem. So ek wil geweet het wat is die plan? Werk u aan 'n plan saam met die minister van social development om hierdie probleem op te los soos in die minder bevoorregte areas waar geweld so hoog is?
Goed, minister, byt vas met jou antwoord. Kom ons kry gou die ander drie asseblief. Baie dankie.
Ja, Good morning, goeiemôre. Dis 'n wonderlike bespreking, Heinrich. Jy hanteer dit baie goed. Die twee jong dames. Oh, you just impressive. What can I say? En Edwin, vir jou het ek net respect. A lot of respect through your wonderful work that you've done. Minister Pieter Groenewald, ek hou baie van die idee van die bandjie en ek dink julle moet
Ekskuus Bram, jy moet dan vir die minister ook 'n kompliment eers gee.
O, hy's baie goed. Nee, hy's uitstekend hoor. Nee, kyk, Cyril het 'n baie goeie aanstelling daar gemaak. Nee, dis die waarheid. Ek dink hy weet dit. Die bandjie of implant of wat ook al, ek dink julle moet dit so gou as moontlik deurvoer. Ek dink dis 'n uitstekende pad om te gaan. En ja, dis eintlik 'n baie sad storie wat julle baie sterk in perspektief plaas. So baie dankie. En hou aan met die goeie werk, Heinrich.
Baie dankie Bram. Die
Dankie.
volgende persoon?
I think the Judge Cameron, I want to talk about your name going onto the national register, you know, because we have somebody in our family who was on drugs and he stole a car, but he never served a sentence, you know.
That's our point.
But the thing is he went, he tried to get a permanent job, and his name was on that national register for 10 years. You know, why is that? You know, it seems to kind of constrain a person. And he's got a fantastic, he's not on drugs anymore, you know. His auntie is a social worker and they all rallied around him. But for 10 years, his name was on that national register, you know.
Okay.
And they went for
I'll
that
only
year.
say that it's something that can be remedied.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to allow the three of you to decide which questions you're taking. Do we have anyone who has served in correctional services? Iemand wat 'n beampte was soos wat ons sê, wat dalk wil praat? Enige, dankie, daar's ene. Toe ons gaan nog daai ene vat dan maak ons klaar.
Ek het die boek gelees en dit was baie swaar en ook wonderlik al die praktiese oplossings wat julle voorstel. Ek het gewonder of maar partykeer voel mens ek het nie 'n posisie van mag of ek's net 'n gewone mens. Is daar enigiets wat jy vir my kan sê? Wat kan ek doen? Behalwe stem vir mense wat ek glo nie korrup is nie. Is daar enigiets wat julle kan voorstel want dis wat mense ook wil voel. Wat kan ek doen?
Sê gou vinnig wat het dit vir jou swaar gemaak?
Maar dis depressing wat daar aangaan. Dit is rof. Die statistieke is rof. Ja.
Ja, baie dankie. Dan 'n laaste inset. Ekskuus. Nee, ons het 'n beampte gekry wat gewerk het in die stelsel. Die judge is so gewoond aan 'n rule in die hof. Nou wil jy sommer hier.
Wel, dit was jy wat kies.
Goeiemôre Heinrich. Goeiemôre minister. Ek het amper gesit te huil minister, né, met ou shame du poor. My eerste ding is vraag is ek het 40 jaar gewerk by Pollsmoor. Ek was baie mooi, maar na 40 jaar is ek nie meer mooi van Pollsmoor nie. My eerste vraag is minister, waarom het ons weggedoen met die auxiliary social workers or auxiliary psychologists, because 'n land soos Denmark het professionals auxiliary workers is weg. Die tweede een, my vraag is, wat het geword van ons gang strategy? How do we deal? And what is correctional services doing with to engage and to work on the individuals, because they already arrive there from street gangs and they migrate to the prison number gang. Judge.
Okay. Dankie. Dankie. Ek gee dan vir minister eerste kans en dan kan die drie skrywers besluit watter een vat watter vraag.
Kom ek begin sommer dadelik, daai is heeltemal reg. Dit is anders, ek weet nie wanneer het jy 40 jaar diens gedoen nie. As jy dit nog in die vorige finansiële jaar gedoen het, dan sou ek vir jou 'n medalje gegee. Want het jy die medalje gekry? Ja, goed, okay. Dis reg. Dit was deel om die, kan ek amper sê, moraal van die werknemers erkenning te gee, medaljes. Dit is so, baie van ons sielkundiges en professionele dienste het die diens verlaat. Want dit het ingekom by die besnoeiing van die begroting, wat hulle van die mense ontslaag geraak het. Met ander woorde, ek sê altyd, ek het baie erfsondes wat ek gekry het. Dis een daarvan. Ons is nou besig weer om hulle professionele mense aan te stel. Ek het byvoorbeeld spesifiek wat 'n kriminoloog wil gebruik, om hulle terug te bring. En kan ek op daai punt sê, Hendrik, want ons gepraat oor die proses. Dit is so, daar's 'n proses. Maar as ek 'n parool aansoek by my kry, en jy moet mooi luister, dan is dit 'n persoon uit 'n 4-jarige, 'n 8-jarige en 'n 13-jarige meisie verkrag. Dan word dit aanbeveel vir parool. Die risiko van heroortreding is matig. Moet ek dan so 'n persoon dan laat uitgaan? Ek sê nee. Daar is verantwoordelikheid. So ons stel weer daai mense aan om te kyk wat ons kan doen om professionele dienste te lewer. Dit bring by die eerste vraag van hulle wil teruggaan, hulle kry 4 eiers of 3 eiers 'n dag of wat ook al die geval. Hulle moet net bietjie gaan lees, hulle sal sien die dieetprogram is aangepas. Ons het byvoorbeeld vleis nie heeltemal weggevat nie. Hulle kry nog bietjie vleis, maar hulle kry nou sojabone. In die plek daarvan, ons bespaar ongeveer 350 miljoen rand per jaar, net om die dieetprogram aan te stel. Maar nou is daar nou van die, kan ons amper sê die personiers, hulle is nou bitter ongelukkig, hulle skryf nou al briewe vir die president en sê, dit kan nie so wees nie, dat al die menseregte word aangetast. Die dieet voldoen aan die wetlike vereistes, so hulle sal voortgaan met daai dieet. So hulle moet hulle nie laat mislei nie, hulle moet kyk wat aangaan.
Solank hulle proteïene kry is
die proteïene kry hulle, moenie bekommerd nie. Daar was 'n ander ek dink dis die 2 vrae basies.
Ja, baie dankie. So ons kan terugkom as jy by die val waar dit was.
I'll answer the question about what all of us as just ordinary people can do, and I think there's a lot we can do. The first is, as you say, to use your political voice. Our politicians, our parliamentarians didn't adopt tough on crime policies because they felt like it. They adopted them responding to all of us and to our fears and our demands. And it's fair for us to demand responses to crime, but we must also demand responses to the social and the economic problems that give rise to crime, and we must be serious about those demands. The second thing is a far more practical thing. That workshop in Durban that I told you about, we were told that the only reason it was able to keep functioning was that members of the local community, local business owners, were donating spare sewing machines, fabrics, were donating their time. Many of the successful rehabilitation programs we see are run by private citizens or religious groups or other community groups who volunteer either their resources or just their time. And so those are things you can do, you can get involved in. And JIX runs a book donation program. Our prisons just don't have enough books, so you can get a hold of JIX. If you have some spare books lying around, they will come and fetch them from you and they will distribute them to prison. So there are lots of small things that we can all do to make people's lives a little better inside and outside of our prisons.
Wil jy dalk iets daaroor sê van die
Ja,
publiek-
kom ek sê, ons is besig met baie projekte. Ek is tans, ons gaan weer begin om skoollesenaars terug te maak en te vervaardig. Ons het die werkswinkels daarvoor. Ons kyk waar ons byvoorbeeld, ek kan byvoorbeeld sê al die klere van die prisoniers word deur ons self gemaak en vervaardig. Ons moet dit uitbrei. Die toerusting is daar. Daar is byvoorbeeld verwysend byvoorbeeld na KwaZulu-Natal waar daar self 'n skool is waar hulle die uniforms vir dis 'n laerskool dit vervaardig. Ons wil dit meer hê. En dis hoekom dit is ook 'n prioriteit soos wat hulle nou altyd verwys na P is. Dit is private-public partnerships. Om daai mense in te kry. My uitgangspunt is dat 'n persoon wat werk, wat besig is. Jy ken die ou spreekwoord wat sê ledigheid is die duiwel se oorkussing. So laat hulle werk. Dis rehabiliterend en ek meen, ek wil nie heel dag in 'n sel net sit en niks doen nie. Kom ons gee vir hulle werk en ek kan verseker, dit is 'n prioriteit by my en die departement om daardie aktiwiteite te bevorder en uit te brei sodat ons eintlik op die einde van die dag word ons meer selfvoorsienend. En dan hoef ons nie elke keer vir die belastingbetaler in die oë te kyk nie.
Judge, ek wonder of jy of Rebecca dan net iets wil sê oor die 3 waarhede, sien dat minister aan die begin gesê het, hy werk net met die waarhede, so daar's die minister se waarheid, julle as navorsers se waarheid, en dan die publiek wat 'n ander soort waarheid met hulle saamdra. Net iets daaroor?
Ek gaan eintlik iets byvoeg by wat so hulle gesê het.
Maar gaan jy steeds my
Borgtogfonds,
vraag ook dan beantwoord?
Miskien. Borgtogfonds, 3300 gevangenes. As u R1000 bydra, gaan u die tronkoorbevolking help, u gaan 'n individu help, iemand wat nog nie skuldig bevind nie, iemand wat die landdros gesê het, sy verhoor gaan staan, nie gaan heroortree nie, en nie 'n gevaar is vir die publiek nie. Dis my antwoord.
Maar ek dink dan my vraag sluit baie goed daarbey aan, want hoe gaan jy reageer as een van hierdie mense sê, en wat gaan dit vir my baat?
Dit baat vir ons almal. Elke stukkie van ons land wat werk, elke stukkie van ons landsbestel wat herfunksioneer, wat geremedieer word, help vir elkeen van ons.
Kan ek sê wat dit baat? Vir elkeen. Spesifiek wat die regter se fonds betref. Die bate daarvan is, jy kry nie 'n geharde misdadiger nie. Jy help dat ek het gesê ek was 'n stoute knaap gewees. Dat baie keer van die goeie stoutigheid. En dan is dit 'n kwessie van jy voorkom dat daai persoon in hierdie omstandighede beland en 'n geharde misdadiger kry. Met ander woorde, die bate is, jy help dat daar minder geharde misdadigers in Suid-Afrika is.
Baie dankie aan die Suidoosterfees, aan die Jakes Gerwel Stichting, aan Netwerk 24, aan Exclusive Books en die ATKV, aan Sohela Surajpal, aan Pieter Groenewald, aan Rebecca Gore en aan Edwin Cameron.
En aan Heinrich.
Julle kan vir hulle 'n handeklap gee. Oh, there are gift bags for you, all of us actually.